So welcome to the video, and today we're going to talk about the 5 mistakes you should avoid if you're learning how to program, right? And doing web
Learning how to
development.
code. Yeah.
Learning how to code. Okay, so what is the first mistake when it comes to learning to code?
I think the very first
Biggest
mistake
one.
when people learning how to write programs, learning
Yep.
how to code, right, is they learn programming, they learn coding just for the sake of learning coding. They don't know why they are learning coding, because probably some people tell them that, you need to learn coding because coding is cool. You need to learn coding because that is the future. Those are correct. I mean, I'm not saying anything is wrong, but don't forget, coding is just the tools or channels for humans to communicate with the machines and the computers, right? So that we can make use of those machines to do work, to follow our instructions, and then perform the tasks we ask the machines to do. Yeah, so don't just learn coding for the sake of learning coding, but actually put it into a actual use case. Now, no matter how simple or how easy is the code that you are going to write,
Yeah.
but make sure that the code that you write actually does something.
I think a lot of people get confused because it's a marketing agenda. People say, "Oh, you have to learn how to code. You have to learn how to code because it's big. Tech is coming, so everybody rush into coding, but they do not know the purpose of why they learn to
Yes.
code in the first place. So I think a lot of people are missing the purpose, right, of learning to code. And at the end of going through a few lessons or going through a few workshops, they don't know what to do.
Correct.
One-
So the purpose of learning coding, like for example, as a digital marketer, I'm sure that you know it better than anyone else. Why do you need to code, right?
Yep.
You need the code to help you to set up all the pixels, to track Facebook ads, to track the performance of Google Analytics. Now you also need to learn how to code. Now writing code is just not about programming. You need to know HTML, CSS to customize the WordPress plugins and all
Right.
the themes. So you definitely know it better than anyone else.
So I found out a little different way. I didn't learn to code because of I want to learn how to code, but I learned how to code because when I did digital marketing, I found out that, hey, I need to learn a bit of technical here and there. I need to learn HTML a bit. I need to learn JavaScript a little bit. And that's when I went, put some time to learning how to code. Correct. So I didn't learn how to code because I want to learn to code, but I found myself needing to code.
I have seen a lot of people who fail in learning coding. Sorry to use such a harsh word, you fail, because they basically just, let's use a very simple scenario like HTML. You go in and learn HTML, you learn what is H1, H2, H3, you learn what is a P tag, you learn CSS, you learn how to change the color in the font. But that's about it, right? If you don't have a purpose, you don't have an outcome, you don't have a goal, and you get burnt out very quickly. Like your interest level drop exponentially, like shoo, because
Nothing useful,
Nothing
right?
useful,
Nothing
right?
useful
So what if I can show a couple of words on a web page? It doesn't give me any sense of achievement, so to speak.
So what do you think is the simplest or the lowest hanging fruit that someone who's learning how to code should build?
Okay, the easiest thing, you can build your own personal website, your portfolio websites, right? Even though it's very simple, very straightforward. But if you think about it, let's say you are a digital marketer, you can build a website to showcase your portfolio. Or if somebody who are a photographer or wedding photographer, videographer, you just build your own website, choose a nice color theme, design a little bit, and put up some of your past work, upload into YouTube, and then embed it into a website. It's something that's very, I would say, very impressive already as a very beginner.
Right. So based on that, right, we both have our own websites, right?
Yes.
So that's the reason why we have our own websites, right?
Yeah,
Yours is
drhanlao.com and
rubencheng.com.
Yeah.
So one of the simplest way, right, to get started, to practice your web development skills is to build your own website, your own branding, or to put up your own site. And make sure to buy your own domain name.
Yes.
Because someone can buy a domain name and sell it back to you at a inflated cost.
Yeah, at much higher cost.
Sidetrack. Anyway, second one mistake when it comes to learning how to code.
Now, the second mistake that people make when it comes to learning how to code is they think that you only need to learn one programming language in your entire programmer's career. Okay, now as a Malaysian, right, I cannot believe that this is what a Malaysian will believe, because as a Chinese kid, I grew up with learning how to speak Mandarin, how to speak English, how to speak Bahasa, and I also learned how to speak dialects like Hokkien and Teochew.
Okay.
And then when I went to study in Australia, I mixed around with a lot of Hong Kong people, and then I started to pick up Cantonese so that I can watch TVB dramas and stuff like that. So learning programming language is like in your actual real life is that you learn different programming language because you want to work in different platforms and you use it under different use case. For example, if you learn Python, you can use it for data science, right?
Automation.
If you learn JavaScript, then you can use it to build web applications and also backend applications. So that's the reason why we have so many programming languages out there in the world, because we want to use it for different purposes.
But according to your advice in the past few webinars and workshops that we've done, one of the ways to look at you to learn a few programming language, not just one.
Yeah.
But if you have to choose one to start off with, right? You always recommended us to go for JavaScript.
Yes.
And why is that? Maybe briefly on JavaScript.
Okay, so JavaScript, number one, is the only programming language that web browsers understand. Right? If you use let's say Google Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Opera, Internet Explorer, or Internet Edge, those browsers only understand JavaScript.
Okay.
And you can find JavaScript not only on the internet browsers on your mobile phones, you find it on the Xbox, PS4, Nintendo Switch, and also your Apple Watches.
Okay.
Yeah, and soon you'll find them in your microwave oven and also your TVs, your washing machine, as long as they're connected to IoT devices using 5G networks. So that's number one reason.
Okay.
And number two reason is, even though if you're a full stack web developers, you code in Ruby on Rails, Python, Django, or let's say PHP, right? You still need to learn JavaScript because of the front-end language. But JavaScript is also the only language that supports both front-end and back-end language.
So I think a lot of people, when they choose programming language, they want to choose a language that would last for a really, really long time. Do you think JavaScript will last a really, really long time? Is it going to change anytime soon?
When I started my coding journey, when I started to build my very first websites, right, the only thing that I do was the scrolling monkey. You remember that, the old school website that would scroll from left to right, and then we have a visitor counter. So those are written using CGI, PerScript, and a little bit of JavaScript to do that.
Right.
So JavaScript has been around since Netscape Navigator era. I believe that most of you have never used that particular browser before, but it has a good 20 to 30 years of history by now, and it's a language that's constantly evolving.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't see any reasons that JavaScript is going downhill anytime soon, at least in the next 3 to 5 years, definitely not.
Right. So there has been a debate, right? Whether JavaScript is easy to start with or which programming language should be easiest to start with.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, JavaScript has nothing to do with Java, right? Although it has the word Java inside, but it's just a beautiful mistake, I would say. Now, if you are looking for an alternative language apart from JavaScript, you can also learn Python to start with, because Python is a very user-friendly, beginners-friendly language, and it's very easy to understand. And you can use that for different types of automation. Basically, there's a book called "Automate the Boring Tasks" with Python, right? Yeah. So that's what Python is good for. But let's take a step back, right? Learning any programming language is actually good for your career, your understanding in terms of programming, because there are different types of programming as well. There are also functional programming, there are also enterprise programming using Java and C#. So any programming language is good, but let's go back to our first point. You have to find your first use case.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, if I take into my perspective, right, since I do digital marketing, I would definitely learn JavaScript first before going to Python, because you find that angle. I mean, when I do digital marketing, there's always so many angles for me to use JavaScript in the projects that I'm working on. So JavaScript would definitely be my first language to learn if I were to be in that position. But it really depends on you yourself, right? What kind of immediate, programming language that you use aside your work.
Yeah, so one thing that I would like to add is that a lot of people, they are confused between the programming language, the frameworks, the tools that they need to learn, right? So I wouldn't recommend anybody to learn C or C++ if you're a total beginner, unless you're a university student, you're studying your first year and you're learning how to build microcontrollers, you learn how to control traffic lights using like those machine language, assembly, C or C++. Otherwise, you can always learn those language later once you have a better understandings and stronger foundations with the programming language itself.
So people are confused between language, frameworks, and tools, right?
Yeah.
So a language is something like?
A programming language like PHP. We have talked a lot on JavaScript and Python, but let's talk about other languages like Java and C#. So every single language, they have their own set of tools. Now, they are not prescribed tools, meaning that there's not a prescription, but these tools are designed especially to use with that language. So for example, in Java programming language, we have NetBeans and also Eclipse. So this is a very good tool to use that. If you want to write Android apps, you also need to use Android Studio, which is also supporting Java programming language. And if you want to build iOS apps, then you probably need to learn Objective-C or Swift language to start with.
So that's the language and the tools, right?
Yes.
Now, what are frameworks?
Now, frameworks is something that we usually compile a couple of the tools together to help us to write our programs more effectively.
Okay.
So you always hear people talk about CSS framework like Bootstrap. A framework is built on top of the language itself. Right? Bootstrap is nothing but CSS framework. So it's a set of rules that if you want to follow Bootstrap, then you have to use a way to define your rows, define your columns, and define the sizes and different color scheme, for example. So, and if we are using Node.js or JavaScript to build our web applications, then we should use Express.js, which is the web framework. I'm not saying that you cannot use any frameworks or any even the native vanilla programming language to do that, but it would be a lot less effective. Like if you were to use Python to build a web application, then you need to use Flask or Django. So it's for the same reason.
So the three things: language, frameworks, and tools.
Ruben, my man, what's up? What are you doing? Why are you squinting at the screen?
Now, I was
there?
at the conference and I took some photos of the presentation and trying to see what they write here, but I can't see. It's too small. Can you see?
No, not really. Come on. Now, wouldn't it be great if you attend a conference and the presentation slides will be available to you for download after the conference?
Sure, but where do we find that?
Now, introducing DM Summit. Now, it's a virtual online summit where all the slides and the speaker's notes will be available for you to download after the conference.
For a lifetime?
Of course, Ruben.
Wow. So get your tickets now, the All Access Pass tickets now at dsmsummit.com, and we'll see you in the summit. Right, okay, let's go to point number 4, right? So one of the biggest mistakes that beginners make when it comes to learning coding and web development is skipping the fundamentals. Now, what kind of fundamentals are we talking about exactly?
So let me use a very layman example, right? A lot of people, when you see them, like they know how to play badminton, they know how to swim. But what is the difference between a professional swimmer and a professional badminton player like Lee Chong-wei? Is that when Lee Chong-wei is training hard, right? He doesn't train on all those special things like jumping smash or a super sharp drop shot. Or when you are swimming, right? They are not just every day go to the swimming pool just swim like a fish. Yeah, but they're focusing on your basic strokes. Your coaches are going to correct your strokes, your fundamentals, right? So for the same reason, and that examples sort of showcase why our fundamentals are so important.
Right.
So in programming context, fundamentals concepts are important because many of those concepts are counterintuitive. For example, what is your feeling when the first time you see something called loop? You never do something in the loop in your daily life, right? I wouldn't go to do a thing 10 times in a row. But a lot of times, there's a huge difference. Like, for example, what is the difference between storing integers, floating numbers, and the use of arrays and dictionaries? These are the things that you normally don't see. And we are not talking in arrays, right? We are not communicating in those computer forms. But those are very common data structures, and it doesn't seem natural or how we can use it in our daily lives. So when people start learning it, they sort of like, very boring, and then they skip it. Yeah.
But do you think it's very common that people skip the fundamentals and go for the sexy stuff?
Yes.
Not even just in programming or coding, but in any sort of other things.
Yeah.
They want to jump to the sexy part first without learning the fundamentals. And
Correct.
that would actually cause regret later on, I guess.
Yeah, so that is actually going to set yourself up with a glass ceiling that I would say become an obstacle later on in your career. Because let's talk about something apart from sports, as in mathematics, right? So when we learn mathematics, when we learn chemistries and physics or any science subjects, that I hate those things when I learn it in high school, because I can't see how I use it in
the purpose.
I don't see the purpose, exactly. I don't see the purpose how I use it in my daily life. But then later on during my PhD time, I slowly realized that, okay, the notations, the syntax, the grammar, the specific ways that we do is how scientists communicate with each other, how mathematicians talk to each other, and how we write it. So you cannot just write everything in English, you have to write in a special mathematical form, set theories, and then that's how scientists and mathematicians communicate. So if you were to communicate with computers, then you have to learn how to write if-else statements, how to write loops, for example.
All right, let's go to the fifth mistake. And the fifth mistake would be
Did not learn how to debug, and also they don't try to understand error message.
okay.
Now, you must have experienced a lot when you are doing things like JavaScript, right?
Okay.
So you remember from time to time when you're fixing a WordPress website,
Right.
the things looks like it's working, but when you go to the console, it shows you some weird error message. And computers programming error message is probably the hardest thing to understand next to the Martian language, yeah, alien language. It's like they give you some weird error codes. If you're not coming from a computer's background, what does 404 means? You don't know, right? Yeah, and the messages that the human cannot understand, or like access not granted, forbidden access. They use some funny, 403, 501, 502, your device genes like that, right? So those are the things that I would suggest every single programmers when you face these problems, right? Don't just Google for the solutions to the error message, but really go in and read what is the cause
of this. Why is it responding with this kind of messages?
Correct, because even though you can use some sort of trick to circumvent the situation and bypass the error for whatever reason, it will come back to bite you later. And that's why I say that in the second part is debugging is very important. It's not just a technique. It's probably an art that every programmer will need to master at the end, because it helps you to identify the bugs and to prevent even bigger bugs and bigger loophole at the end.
Right. Now I want to give something towards our audience who's watching this, right? So, you don't have to be a web developer to debug stuff as well. Sometimes you go to a payment page, anywhere, you buy something and you click a button, nothing happens.
Yeah.
Right? Now, one way to debug that is to, if you're on Google Chrome, is to right click, go into inspect, right?
That's
and
basically the developer panel.
Developer panel, and then go into console.
Console.
And you can see the error message that comes out when when something does not work on the website itself. And you'll be able to see those messages there. And what you're saying is a developer should know what those error messages mean.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And by looking through those error messages, it gives you some ideas. At least if you were to talk to their support also, you sort of know that, okay, this is the error from my browser, or this is the error from the server side. To start with, in a more layman context. Then you further dig inside, you understand, okay, these are, what are the cause of these issues basically.
Okay, so we talk about the 5 biggest mistakes when it comes to learning programming and coding. So the first one would be, people just learning coding for the sake of learning coding without a purpose. The second one would be, a lot of people think that they only have to learn a single programming language and they're set for life, but basically they have to learn a few programming language. Now the third one would be, a lot of people are confused between languages, frameworks, and also tools. The fourth one is skipping fundamentals, a mistake that a lot of us do, not only in coding or programming, but in a lot of different things as well. Right? And the fifth one is good developers should know how to read error messages. Now, what are other mistakes do you think a lot of beginner in web development making? Put them down in the comment section. If you are on Facebook Live, put them down in the comment section as well. We'll be here to answer them. And now, the golden question, right? Now, knowing all these 5 mistakes, how do someone get started with web development?
As usual, right? If you want to learn how to build a proper web applications from end to end, do visit our Full Stack 360 course. So inside the course, I will teach you everything starts from HTML, CSS, JavaScript, how to build a proper website, all the way to deployment. So how do you launch your website, set up a DNS, IP addresses, and put it out on AWS or DigitalOcean.
Right. So I think one of the best things about the program is called Full Stack 360, by the way. You can always Google that, Full Stack 360. One of the best things about the program is that you have a mentor, or basically mentors actually, right? Guiding you the process from A to Z, right? So, anytime you stumble upon any parts of that, you can always ask questions and someone will guide you through the whole process. And by the end of the course, basically you will know how to start things and end things basically.
Correct. Yeah. And as I always say, right, we're always good at initializing some sort of projects, and things get harder, especially when you're at your last mile. The last 10% is always the hardest. It's very hard to launch a website, it's very hard to deploy it to the server, it's very hard to debug, like we mentioned earlier. But those are actually the things that you need the most, and that's why we have lifetime warranty as well. So anytime you have questions, you can always come back to our Slack group, talk to myself or our other instructors, and who have tons of industry experience.
Right. Okay, so hope to see you in Full Stack 360 and also in the live videos, in the Facebook videos, webinars that we do. And let us know about your comments. If you know of any other big mistakes that a beginner should avoid when it's learning to code, put them down in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this. Like our Facebook on Facebook, right? And join Lead Knowledge Circle where we discuss and share ideas on tech, full stack development, data science, and also digital marketing. And till then, see you in the next video.
See you.